of Pinocchio. Chapter 5. Pinocchio is hungry and looks for an egg to cook himself an omelette. But, to his surprise, the omelette flies out of the window. If the cricket's death scared Pinocchio at all, it was only for a very few moments. For, as night came on, a queer, empty feeling at the pit of his stomach reminded the marionette that he had eaten nothing as yet. A boy's appetite grows very fast, and in a few moments the queer, empty feeling had become hunger, and the hunger grew bigger and bigger until soon he was as ravenous as a bear. Poor Pinocchio ran to the fireplace where the pot was boiling, stretched out his hand to take the cover off, but to his amazement the pot was only painted. Think how he felt. His long nose became at least 2 inches longer. He ran about the room, dug in all the boxes and drawers, and even looked under the bed in search of a piece of bread, hard though as it might be, or a cookie, or perhaps a bit of fish. A bone left by a dog would have tasted good to him, but he found nothing. And meanwhile his hunger grew and grew. The only relief poor Pinocchio had was to yawn, and he certainly did yawn, such a big yawn that his mouth stretched out to the tips of his ears. Soon he became dizzy and faint. He wept and wailed to himself. The talking cricket was right. It was wrong of me to disobey father and run away from home. If he were here, I wouldn't be so hungry. Oh, how horrible it is to be hungry. Suddenly he saw, among the sweepings in a corner, something round and white that looked very much like a hen's egg. In a jiffy he pounced upon it. It was an egg. The marionette's joy knew no bounds. It is impossible to describe it. You must picture it to yourself. Certain that he was dreaming, he turned the egg over and over in his hands, fondled it, kissed it, and talked to it. And now, how should I cook you? Shall I make omelette? No, it is better to fry you in a pan. Or shall I drink you? No, the best way is to fry you in a pan. You will taste better. No sooner said than done. He placed a little pan over a foot warmer full of hot coals. In the pan, instead of oil or butter, he placed a little water. As soon as the water began to boil, tack! He broke the eggshell. But in place of the white and the yolk of the egg, a little yellow chick, fluffy and gay and smiling, escaped from it. Bowing politely to Pinocchio, he said to him, "Many, many thanks indeed, Mr. Pinocchio, for having saved me the trouble of breaking my shell. Good-bye and good luck to you, and remember me to the family." With these words he spread out his wings and, darting to the open window, he flew away into space until he was out of sight. The poor marionette stood as if turned to stone, with wide eyes, open mouth, and the end of the eggshell in his hands. When he came to himself, he began to cry and shriek at the top of his lungs, stamping his feet on the ground and wailing all the while. The talking cricket was right. If I had not run away from home, and if father were here now, I should not be dying from hunger. Oh, how horrible it is to be hungry! And as his stomach kept grumbling more than ever, and he had nothing to quiet it with, he thought of going out for a walk to the nearby village in hopes of finding some charitable person who might give him a bit of bread. The Adventures of Pinocchio. Chapter 7. Pinocchio falls asleep with his feet on a foot warmer and awakens the next day with his feet all burned off. Pinocchio hated the dark street, but he was so hungry that, in spite of it, he ran out of the house. The night was pitch black. It thundered, and bright flash of lightnings now and again shot across the sky, turning it into a sea of fire. An angry wind blew cold and raised dense clouds of dust, while the trees shook and moaned in a weird way. Pinocchio was greatly afraid of the thunder and lightning, but the hunger he felt was far greater than his fear. In a dozen leaps and bounds he came to the village, tired out, puffing like a whale, and with tongue hanging. The whole village was dark and deserted. The stores were closed, the doors, the windows, in the streets not even a dog was seen. It seemed like the village of the dead. Pinocchio, in desperation, ran up to a door. He threw himself upon the bell and pulled it wildly, saying to himself, "Someone would surely answer that." He was right. An old man in a nightcap opened the window and looked out. He called down angrily, "What do you want at this hour of night? Will you be good enough to give me a bit of bread? I am hungry." "Wait a minute and I'll come right back," answered the old fellow, thinking he had to deal with one of those boys who live to roam around at night, ringing people's bells while they are peacefully asleep. After a minute or two, the same voice cried, "Get under the window and hold out your hat." Pinocchio had no hat, but he managed to get under the window just in time to feel a shower of ice-cold water pour down on his poor wooden head, his shoulders, and over his whole body. He returned home as wet as a rag and tired out from his weariness and hunger. As he no longer had any strength left of which to stand, he sat down on a little stool and put his 2 feet on the stove to dry them. There he fell asleep, and while he slept, his wooden feet began to burn. Slowly, very slowly, they blackened and turned to ashes. Pinocchio snored away happily as if his feet were not his own. At dawn he opened his eyes just as a loud knocking sounded at the door. "Who is it?" he called, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "It is I," answered a voice. It was the voice of Geppetto. The Adventures of Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi. Chapter 7. Geppetto returns home and gives his own breakfast to the marionette. The poor marionette, who was still half asleep, had not yet found out that his 2 feet were burned and gone. As soon as he heard his father's voice, he jumped up from his seat to open the door, but as he did so, he staggered and fell headlong to the floor. In falling, he made as much noise as a sack of wood falling from the 5th story of a house. "Open the door for me," Geppetto shouted from the street. "Father, dear father, I can't," answered the marionette in despair, crying and rolling on the floor. "Why can't you?" "Because someone has eaten my feet." "And who has eaten them?" "The cat," answered Pinocchio, seeing that little animal busily playing with some shavings in the corner of the room. "Open, I say," repeated Geppetto, "or I'll give you a sound whipping when I get in." "Father, believe me, I can't stand up. Oh dear, I shall have to walk on my knees all my life." Geppetto, thinking that all these tears and cries were only the other pranks of the marionette, climbed up the side of the house and went in through the window. At first he was very angry, but on seeing Pinocchio stretched out on the floor and really without feet, he felt very sad and sorrowful. Picking him up from the floor, he fondled and caressed him, talking to him while the tears ran down his cheeks. "My little Pinocchio, my dear little Pinocchio, how did you burn your feet?" "I don't know, father, but believe me, the night has been a terrible one, and I shall remember it as long as I live. The thunder was so noisy and the lightning so bright, and I was hungry. And then the talking cricket said to me, 'You deserve it, you are bad.' And I said to him, 'Careful, cricket,' and he said to me, 'You are a marionette and you have a wooden head,' and I threw the hammer at him and killed him. It was his own fault, for I didn't want to kill him. And I put the pan on the coals, but the chick flew away and said, 'I'll see you again, remember me to the family.' And my hunger grew, and I went out, and the old man with a nightcap looked out a window and threw water on me, and I came home, put my feet in the stove to dry them, because I was still hungry, and I fell asleep. Now my fear are gone, but my hunger isn't. Oh, oh, oh!" And poor Pinocchio began to scream and cry so loudly that he could be heard for miles around. Geppetto, who had heard nothing at all of that jumbled talk, except that marionette was hungry, felt sorry for him, and pulling 3 pears out of his pocket, offered them to him, saying, "These 3 pears were for my breakfast, but them to you gladly. Eat them and stop weeping. If you want me to eat them, please peel them for me. Peel them? Asked Geppetto, very much surprised. I should never have thought, dear boy of mine, that you are so dainty and fussy about your food. Bad, very bad. In this world, even as children, we must accustom ourselves to eat of anything, for we never know what life may hold in store for us. You may be right, answered Pinocchio, but I will not eat the pears if they are not peeled. I don't like them. And good old Geppetto took out a knife, peeled the 3 pears, and put the skins in a row on the table. Geppetto ate a pear in twinkling and started to throw the core away, but Geppetto held his arm. Oh no, don't throw it away. Everything in this world may be of some use. But the core I will not eat, cried Pinocchio in an angry tone. Who knows? Repeated Geppetto calmly. And later the 3 cores were placed on the table next to the skins. Pinocchio had eaten the 3 pears, or rather devoured them. Then he yawned deeply and wailed, I'm still hungry, but I have no more to give you. Really, nothing? Nothing? I have only these 3 quarts and these skins. Well, well, then, said Pinocchio. If there's nothing else, I'll eat them. At first he made a wry face, but, one after another, the skins and the cores disappeared. Ah, now I feel fine, he said after eating the last one. You see, observed Geppetto, I was right that when I told you that one must not be too fussy and too dainty about food. My dear, we never know what life may have in store for us.